The church had rid itself of pagan rivals and of its resemblance to them, had to erase its borrowing from them. It searched out pagans with vicious brutality. Pagan prophets were tortured until they admitted that their gods were frauds. Priests were chained to their shrines and left to starve to death. Pagans were tortured until they admitted to the false charges that they had sacrificed children and other fantasy crimes. As mentioned earlier, some ancient shrines were razed to the ground, often with churches built over them, or simply allowed to stand, purified, and taken over by Christian churches. Pagan literature was decimated. According to McMullen, one witness wrote, innumerable bodies were piled together, many heaps of volumes drawn from various houses to be burned due to the opinion of the judges as prohibited. Owners burnt their entire libraries. So great was the terror that seized everyone. The church did not want to portray the pagan religions as merely untrue, but to depict them as created by demons, gods who worked magic to deceive the gullible. It wanted to be perceived as the one true faith, and to bring that perception about, worked tirelessly to destroy the knowledge of and memory of the mystery cults. Those cults bore too much resemblance to the church, many of whose hierarchy knew that it was an imitation church they served, with rites and beliefs taken from the pagan and Judaic religions. The church engaged in a huge cover-up, not only with the destruction of its rivals, but with the construction of a revised and largely false history of its origins. When people disputed this concocted history, they were simply done away with or frightened into silence. For a while, few dared to oppose the church. But truth can only be suppressed for a while. Eventually, the Renaissance emerged in Europe, then the Protestant Reformation, and then the Enlightenment. Reason and the scientific method began to prevail. But religion is still strong and still clings to its outworn belief system. Christianity is a deadly shark, missing a few of the sharp teeth with which it would impose its belief system on the world. Religion, all religion, not just Christianity, has been backed into a corner by science, sociology, neuroscience, and the modern world. Let us, in the Western world, by means of truth, both historical and scientific truth, open the back door where it continues to linger, and send it out into the darkness it would perpetuate if it had the strength. Thank you for listening to this lecture. I am looking forward to our discussion.
Very well laid out. Very well presented.
Sure.
Yeah. You mentioned cave births,
Mhm.
but Jesus wasn't
In,
known to be
in
born
some in some variants of that myth, he was born in a cave. He wasn't just born in a stable.
That wasn't the way it was translated down to us, though.
Well,
in
a lot
King
of things
James.
have been translated down to us,
Yeah, so-
when everything's solidified.
But that's not a very strong argument to say that.
It's not strong, but it's viable. You have to remember that this stuff was like circulating in the early years. And the way it's been translated to us now, it's fixed. The Christian church wasn't fixed in its early days.
Yeah, but they would say, the apologists would say, well, that's because it wasn't true. Those other stories were decidedly false.
Well, yeah, they say it, but who believes them? We have a certain amount of history on our side, that these myths and these variants took place. Now, Dionysius had variants of how he was born, and Mithras had variants. There weren't fixed stories, more or less.
So at present, though, the cave is not part of biblical scripture?
No, it is not. No, it is not.
And how old would you date the beliefs that were similar to Christianity? How far back can we go in history to say, you mentioned the Sumerians.
Right, they go
Would
very
that-
far back.
Yeah, would that be the earliest point in history where we could say, yes, this ritual, this belief was similar to what the Christians
Well,
believed?
those dying and reviving gods probably came about when people started doing agriculture, according to Fraser.
So it's lost to history then, it predates
Right.
writing.
Right. And people have been trying to attack Fraser, but now it's coming back again in kind of a revised form. Why they're attacking these things, I don't know, because everybody knew about them. It's probably a way of establishing themselves as scholars with a different theory. I think that's part of it.
I also think that religion today is under attack from all sides,
yeah,
and they have to go back to reestablishing, re-saying that this is the way it was. This is the absolute truth. This was
Yeah.
all foretold,
yeah,
just as they did earlier
Yeah.
on, and saying that authenticating Jesus through the house of David and
right.
the prophecies, and he's fulfilling all the prophecies in the Old Testament.
Well, there is a line from, Jesus, I think from Elijah, the prophet. I'm not sure exactly from the Old Testament,
Mhm.
but I'm not dealing with that tonight. That is tricky.
Now, Dionysus, you mentioned him a few times.
Oh, yeah.
Was he considered a real guy, a mythical character, a man god?
He was considered a god.
He was considered a god.
Yeah.
So did he walk the earth
Yeah,
in their
oh, yeah.
mythology?
Oh, yeah, he
So
was
he had
very
body.
dangerous.
Okay. So he was considered a historical figure, not just a mythical figure.
Well, I mean, they believed in their gods at the time, more or less. The intellectuals, a lot of them didn't really believe in these gods, but the common people did, yes. Probably the rites of Dionysius with the wine and everything, the sacred rites, they believed that the Greek drama grew out of that. And there was always, even though he didn't have much to do with the drama, they always had his mask at the dramas. So there was some kind of,
Drama as in theater.
theater, the Greek theater, the ancient Greek theater. His mask was always there.
So, but he wasn't considered a son of God then. He was considered,
Well,
A
he would be the son of
incarnation
Zeus.
of God.
Yeah, he would be the son of Zeus.
oh, the son of Zeus.
Yeah,
Okay.
most of these gods were sons of Zeus and Hera, or Zeus and some woman that he had relations with. And Dionysius was the son of Semele.
Who was a mortal woman?
Yeah, she was a mortal woman.
Okay.
Zeus used to like to play around a lot, and apparently in
Very
one
much like
variant
Mary.
of the myth, she made him promise her to. She made Zeus promise to fulfill any, and she wanted to see him in all his glory. And this upset him because he knew this would kill her, my God, it's so glorious. And of course, when she saw him like that, she burned up or whatever. And so he took, in that variant, he took Dionysius and sewed him into his thigh till he came to term and then gave birth to him. It's quite amazing. And another one, he gave the baby to some nymphs to raise, and they raised him, I think, on honey and milk and stuff. So, there's all variants.
But she did get to know Zeus in a biblical sense.
Oh yeah, Zeus had a lot of mistresses.
They didn't have biblical census back then.
Yeah, it wasn't biblical, it was Zeusian, I guess.
Zeus.
There's hundreds, not hundreds, but there's dozens of stories of Zeus's dalliances.
It's good to be king.
Yeah, good to be a god. Yeah, he was the god of all the gods.
Did the Romans get crucifixion from some earlier source, some earlier people?
That's an interesting question, probably.
Because you mentioned the tree hanging from the
Yeah,
tree.
yeah, these gods were supposed to be hanging on the tree. I'm sure that came from an earlier source.
So resurrection, you mentioned, based on plants, seasons that wax and wane.
That's the theory. Now,
And
it's
stuff like that.
disputed. It's a disputed theory, but I've always accepted it, so.
But in your opinion, is it just human nature to desire immortality,
Sure,
to not be able to envision your end,
sure,
to,
Oh, yeah.
so it's like a totally natural
yeah,
part of evolution that religion would have come about almost, just.
yeah. I think, didn't Jung say that, the unconscious was kind of timeless? It didn't really have an end. So
That
we
would
can't,
all be drawn to the same symbols.
right, yes, so that
But
we can't
nevertheless-
picture an end.
When you have these pagan religions and Christianity all looking the same, it makes Christianity look rather average,
Yeah,
not the exceptional religion that they want to claim it to be.
that's what it would have been, but Constantine chose it. you know, his mother was a Christian, and I think he saw it as a new religion. It was growing, you know.
But it was growing despite the Romans trying to wipe it out.
Yeah, except, you know, they weren't, you know, you'll see that in a future lecture,
Yeah, it was limping.
that their persecutions were way
Exaggerated.
exaggerated. There's a Candida Moss is a very well-known now theologian, and she writes, I mean, she's a scholar of biblical history and theology and whatever, and she's written some good books, and she's discovered that these persecutions have been way inflated. I think you'll find that an interesting lecture. And her credentials are very solid.
But at the time, you mentioned in your lecture that what became the Christian church was just one of many
Oh my
little
gosh.
cults that were all and around
Yeah,
the Middle
Mithras
East
was
there.
much bigger, especially, but see, it only appealed to men more in the army. The cult of Isis was all over the world. It was very, very popular. But Constantine made it the official Roman religion, and, you know, Greek thought was dying out, you know, the rationalists, you know, and I think that they just grabbed onto this mystery. Gosh knows who. And then they were very well organized afterwards. You got to give them that. And they still are. You notice how they still wiggle
Oh, they
around.
still-
Well, it's hard not to apply natural selection
Yeah,
to the concept of religion.
sure.
It was the survival of the fittest. There
Yeah.
were a lot of them around.
Yeah.
This one,
This one
and
matched
if you
something.
had one that didn't quite do it, you just tweak it. And
Yeah.
You,
That's what they did. They were very
Until
good
you
at
found
tweaking.
success.
They were very
Yeah.
good at tweaking. They were very good at organizing.
they still do it.
Yeah, and they still keep it
Still
up.
do it.
We
Yeah,
can't get
remember
rid
that
of it.
one of their big selling things was their miracles were better than anybody else's.
Yeah, that was very big
Yeah.
back then.
They-
Yeah.
They sold that.
They must have been like, you know, playing tricks with the
They were,
miracles.
you know,
That's
magicians were,
They were better.
Yeah.
They were just
they
better.
had better magicians.
So when people saw that, they said, well, and they would
Wow,
convert,
this
you
must
know.
be it.
It's fascinating.
And the promise of eternal bliss
Yeah,
after death.
yeah.
But the tricks, I know I was in Pompeii, and you know, some of those temples, they had
Oh, yeah.
elaborate mechanisms or flowing water, or
Right.
things would
Oh, yeah,
morph and
yeah.
change and
Yes,
rise and prestidigitation all the way.
yes,
And so miracles,
Right before your eyes.
yeah.
get a better miracle, so,
Remember, there were a lot of magicians running around at that time. I mean, that people
Yeah.
believed in, not like our, you know, magicians where we enjoy the trick,
yeah.
kind of. And there's theories even that that's what Jesus was, kind of a wandering healer magician. Who knows? Was he even real? I wonder sometimes.
I don't think people have changed a whole lot, because you can pull the wool over their eyes with a little bit of deceit to this day. I think
Still
and it doesn't
works.
even have to be magical bread stuff. Just make a few statements and
Yeah. And
you
give me your
change.
money. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and they do.
But how do you explain that Christianity is so associated historically with Judaism, with an offshoot of Judaism?
Well, because see, I didn't go into that part. It's very strongly associated with Judaism. They grew
Yeah.
up on it was a Jewish sect.
So people like Bart Ehrman use that as a defense and say, well, no, it couldn't possibly be just another mystery cult because it came from Jewish culture.
No, it's both. It's both, and that's what they want to deny.
You mentioned Ehrman, but you didn't
Yeah.
really go into the rebuttals about why you feel that he is wrong in saying that this was not a mystery cult, this was something else.
Well, because the scholars I've read really have rebutted him very well. I mean, Richard Carrier has rebutted him tooth and nail practically on the historicity of Jesus. And very strongly, very strong arguments. Read that.
What I recall, I haven't read that, but what I read of Ehrman is that he said, no, it was the opposite, is that the mystery cults continued and they borrowed from Christianity.
No, they didn't. He's absolutely
took-
wrong.
They took the Christian...
How could they borrow it when they were existing before with all these rites and everything and these inscriptions?
That the writings, you know, that we have today were written after the crucifixion of Christ.
He's wrong.
That
He's
these were-
wrong.
These
These
were
things go
myths.
way back.
But think about, Mary, the preservation of what would have survived for the scholars to even
But they
know
have
about.
them, they have them, I
Not
don't know
in
what
the
he's
original.
talking
It's
about.
it's the same problem with the Bible, we don't have the original, so.
No, but we have a lot of the old manuscripts. You're saying that they forged
The
them?
pagan,
Why would
you
they
don't have the
forge them?
original, you do not, I'm just trying to play fair. You
Okay,
don't have the original pagan manuscripts anymore, you have them in the original
okay,
gospel.
I agree, but why would they have forged them?
To try and steal back or steal from Christianity for the same reason
It's
Christianity.
just silly, they all existed
Exactly,
together.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
But they discovered, remember Mary in her lecture pointed out that they discovered these slips, little slips.
The gold
The
tablets.
gold leaf
They
tablets.
couldn't have made those up.
And those were authentic.
Those are not
Yeah.
paper.
No, those are authentic, yeah.
How do you date gold?
God, I don't know how they dated them, but they've dated them properly, I'm sure.
Because there are other.
You know
things-
why?
There are sayings in stone that are carved into stone, and the stone is dated.
Yeah.
And they're just almost exactly the same
Oh,
as the
okay.
thing, the entreaties that are in there. This is you do this, you do that, and you'll get you'll get to the right spot, that kind of thing.
The Egyptians had very good records like that.
Yeah, and we have from, we have things from the Egyptians. I mean, I have no idea what these contemporary scholars are talking about, except that they want to make some kind of case that Christianity was unique, and it really wasn't.
Well, but Aaron said that the similarities are very superficial. That the rising God, but this is a misinterpretation because there's so many differences as well.
But but I said that earlier, I addressed that. They came out of different cultures, they would be different.
Yeah, so you see, again, you have some you could say you have some coincidental similarities, but why wouldn't you? Just like anything else in life, there's gonna be coincidences.
Of course, but
And
I
it's
just don't accept it.
interesting how they, from their point of view, why they would say that, because today you look around and the Catholic Church, for example, in its worldwide, functioning, all the masses are celebrated the same. They're exactly the same. So therefore, the Catholic Church is exactly the same all the way around the world. Therefore, the mystery cults were just, that wasn't right.
I see what you mean, yeah.
Yeah. Why weren't the mystery cults all the same and all around the world the same?
Mm-hmm.
But if we agree that it's basic human nature to desire immortality and to come to this point,
Sure,
because you can't, that's one thing we're saying would be universal across the planet. Could there be other things that are, which I think is to your point, spontaneously, the same concept of a virgin birth
sure,
come into existence without building on any other things.
sure.
So,
Well, there were some gods
Who
that were
knows how
born
far
from
that
virgins.
goes.
So this is not so, none of these things are unusual. It's just that the
Yeah.
Christians took them to a greater height and, made them all doctrine, and they were very, very good at organization, better than everybody else, I would say.
We're arguing about a fiction anyway.
Yeah.
We know it's fiction.
Yeah.
So it's sort of hard to put ourselves in the case of a true Christian. What would a true Christian say? He might say, well, what would you expect this true religion to look like?
Sure,
It looks like the true religion that this Christian believes in.
Yeah.
So that's what they may say, is that, well, what would you expect it to look like?
But
If it didn't look like the mystery
they
religion.
don't have a problem with it. I don't, I'm not gonna mention names or institutions now, but I talked to a really fine professor of Byzantine and Hellenistic at one time, and he had been an Orthodox
person.
priest, a Greek Orthodox priest, who had left because he thought they were too dedicated to spending money on buildings and what have you. And he remained, of course, a very faithful Greek Orthodox. And I talked to him about the resemblance. This is when I was much younger and I hadn't really studied as much, but I could see the resemblance between Dionysius, or Bacchus, as the Romans called him, back then, okay? And he didn't disagree with me at all. he had read many of the ancient documents, and he said in the Greek, they were calling on Jesus, they were calling him Vakos, like Bacchus.
Mm.
And I said, do you find this disturbing, And he said, no, not at all. It was preparing the world for the true Jesus, the true God. And this was either it was diabolic mimicry or preparing the world. These are the two arguments. And of course, if you have any sense, you're going to take preparing the world because it's a little more moderate. He was perfectly serene and content.
He was okay with that.
Perfectly. He had no problem.
Because you don't really expect him to say, oh, you're right, Mary, I'm gonna give up my religion now because you said it was just like the Greeks.
Well, I wasn't making that case
Yeah.
because I was much younger and I hadn't studied as much and, I was interested, frankly, I was just interested in his opinion.
Yeah.
And it was amazing to me that he reinforced for me, indeed, in fact, he had no problem with the concept that when they were calling on Jesus at that time, they were calling on Bacchus. And that these things had been preserved in the ancient things, so when the Christians were calling on Jesus, they were also calling him Bacchus. He had no problem with it, but here it was in some pretty ancient manuscripts. It hadn't made the full transition yet.
See, because I think the secularists think that, if they can just make the convincing argument that these are mystery religions in Christianity, then people will give up Christianity.
No, they won't.
But they're not going to, because
No, they won't.
it's their religion from their very youngest age, their very youngest memory. So they're
They're
not just
sure
going to
of
give
it.
it up just because we've proven that the sun god is really
They won't give
an
it up at
Egyptian
all.
god. So you can only take that argument so far. For academic reasons, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
But it's not very compelling for just your average Christian.
Well, no argument is compelling for your average Christian. Evolution isn't compelling.
They're going to say, so what?
This is a problem with trying to argue or reason with people. It's impossible.
The better example would be, we look a little bit like monkeys, therefore,
Yeah.
Evolution must be true. Well,
Yeah.
they're going to say, no, that doesn't prove anything.
No.
And it doesn't.
No.
Well, they've got that catch-all phrase with God, all things are possible.
Yeah. Yeah, when they get right down to it, this is it. They'll say that God, did these things, and prepared the world or whatever, or that these are forgeries, the fossils and things like that. And you always end up with just, actually, I kind of knew that when I was a lot younger, and that's kind of why I stopped arguing with people even then, because when we were taking the different humanistic studies when I was in college, and you remember, we were talking about that with you, Norm, recently, remember about how good some of those were. Well, anyway, so I was learning more about these gods, and I was getting more excited because it was reinforcing my lack of faith. And I was talking to some of the girls in the dorm who were taking the same module, because everybody took that their first 2 years. And they were like Christians, and they saw I was reinforcing their faith because everything was like leading up to Jesus.
Yeah.
So, I said, I'm convinced in my point of view, more so, and they're convinced more so in their point of view. So, where are we? We're still at odds.
Because they would say, well, but Christianity survived and these others didn't.
Yeah,
So we must be divine,
yeah,
right? Which is what the Jews would say.
yeah.
All these other religions are gone. Judaism is still
We're there, yeah.
We must be divine.
And Islam, too.
Islam is a different story.
Well, yeah, they're a little later, but
Yeah.
still. It's very frustrating, really, actually. That's why I do
yes.
not like to argue with Christians.
What
Or
is-
any religion, any religion.
So what is your opinion of that movie, The God Who Wasn't There?
Oh, that was funny. That was funny. I remember
You know,
that.
As I recall, that goes into exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
But how old is this idea or this argument that Christianity is really just a rehash of these older religions?
Well, you have it in the church fathers themselves because they're complaining about certain things that were being incorporated. As I read that they were saying, oh, this is pagan, that's pagan. There were church fathers that were complaining about this.
But that's what they would do to try and separate it. So So they saw some similarities, but
Well, that they didn't like, and they didn't want those customs to be brought into the church, but of course they were wrong. History has proved them wrong.
but that wasn't really a comparison. They were afraid that these other rituals were coming in, not that these rituals had started, that Christianity came from these.
Well, it sounded like they were bringing those in, though.
It would
And
be
where
just
did
like-
those come from if they had been borrowed from the Christians, rather
Well,
than the other way around?
It would be similar to someone today trying to bring something else
Yeah.
into Christianity that
Yeah.
wasn't part of Christianity.
Yeah.
I think that's what the church fathers were saying.
Well, no, they were saying it was diabolical mimicry, and they were saying that it was adopting pagan customs.
Yeah, but where did
So-
the secular argument, you mentioned a book from the 1890s. Is that when the secular arguments began?
Gibbon, I think I mentioned Gibbon's
Yeah,
Decline
or
and Fall.
is it
didn't
even
I?
earlier, where they said, your religion of Christianity looks a lot like these mystery cults.
Well, it was going on. I mean, Fraser's Golden Bough was probably the big one with the dying and reviving gods. But Gibbon realized it. I mean, everybody realized it. I don't know what the problem is with it now. I accept it as some kind of, academic denial. But our people are fighting back, and it's very hard to argue with Robert Price and Richard Carrier. They're really fine scholars. Very
But
serious
spontaneous
scholars that
generation
know
still is-
the biblical things, that know the ancient. I'm sorry.
Spontaneous generation is plausible.
Oh yeah.
Still, I mean, when you look at the concept of baptism, here they are living in an ancient world, nomadic desert dwellers.
Yeah.
How refreshing is washing away your sins? I mean, the parasites, the dirt, the lightness
Yeah.
that you feel after that, I am clean and I am new and I am refreshed and I'm
But
resurrected.
remember, they were in the
it's a
Hellenistic
natural
times. They
thing
were
for
also
people.
living in pretty decent cities and things, and these rites were still, popular.
Well, to this day,
Had meaning to it.
when I wash off, I
Yeah,
feel
yeah. So
refreshed
so, yeah,
and,
Sure.
So that's
yeah.
a real natural human
Yeah.
concept too,
yeah,
that could happen anywhere, I mean.
yeah.
And hell could always be fire.
Why
It's
not?
one of the worst things we know of, most
Why not?
painful, and continues to burn you forever almost after.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have it's a little tangent, but it comes right back to what you introduced very early on. In the Catholic services at Lent, there's a question and answer going on between the priest and the congregation.
Okay.
You've observed that.
Yeah.
Yeah. The priest will say something and the congregation will come back with something.
Yeah.
One of the things that is said, and it's a common plea today, but it's hundreds of years, it's all the way back to that, and you can trace it all the way back to what you were talking about, the Lord Christ.
Kyrios Christos.
Kyrios Christos,
Yeah, I
because
grew up
here
with
it
that.
comes.
Funny as hell when I
Now,
think
we
of
have
it.
caused, by our neglect, by our sins,
Yeah.
we have caused thus and thus, and
Yeah.
the congregation says, Lord Christ, have mercy on us.
In the Greek church, they say Kyrie eleison.
Kyrie eleison.
Kyrios,
Yeah,
Lord.
Kyrios,
Lord have,
yeah.
here-
That's very
Give us
common.
mercy.
And that's the church, the congregation response. And then the
Yes.
next thing might be, we have had evil thoughts about this and that, and
Yeah.
we've neglected you in our prayers.
Yeah.
Lord Christ, have mercy
Yeah,
on us.
yeah, they say it in the Greek church too, over and over.
Yeah.
Kyrie eleison,
Over
Kyrie
and over
eleison.
and over.
They make
There's
the sign
about
of the
10,
cross like
and everybody's
this. Yeah.
making the sign
Yeah.
of the cross.
The Catholic, they do it this
The
way.
Catholic, yeah, this way and that way. Yes, so it's still there.
And that's during Lent?
Yeah,
That's
it was-
during that.
yeah.
The Jews also have something in their services that is
Oh my
very
God,
similar.
how
This
funny.
is responsive reading. And
Responsive
yeah,
reading,
and
yes.
the chorus, which is the congregation, responds
Yes,
with,
yes.
Lord have mercy, basically.
Oh, really?
God have mercy on us. So it's very interesting. Maybe they got it from the Catholics.
No, I doubt it. I
No.
think the Catholics probably got it
from them.
the
From the
Jews.
Jews?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
not gonna say it's dated to ancient times.
I
A lot of it-
probably is damn close. No,
I wouldn't
The
make that
synagogue
claim.
service is probably about the time that the temple was destroyed.
Yeah, but you have to imagine that things changed just
Yeah.
naturally over
Yeah, they
but-
change
But
over
it
the
is
years.
interesting of the similarities, yeah.
So
And-
is
go
the
ahead.
character of God that, such that if I don't ask him to have mercy, he's not, I mean, you have to kinda, I thought
I
you
think
just
you gotta
wanted to be
ask
nice
him.
to
I
us.
think you
want
gotta
to
ask-
encourage him.
Okay.
You want to encourage him.
I think you gotta
And he likes
ask him.
repetitive
Yeah.
Yeah.
statements, like he's, maybe
Remember, he's like, he's a
obsessive
very jealous
compulsive.
God. He's gonna get you.
If anything, I think these similarities support the idea of the power of myth,
Yes,
is that there's going to be these universals.
Oh, yeah.
You mentioned the Jungian collectives, that the idea of water, cleansing, dirt, rebirth, all of these are universals. These are vocabulary
yeah,
universals that in any culture, we would have the same things. We all have
Yeah.
seasons and death and life.
Yeah. Well, Jung the Jungians have done some really good
Yeah.
job with a lot of the Greek gods and goddesses and things, but, as always, as far as I'm concerned, they've gone too far,
So for a secularist, it would be like, well, of course Christianity would have similar things because it's all coming from the unconscious, the
Sure.
collective unconscious.
Sure.
Of course it would look like every other religion, not just because they were in the same geographic region,
No,
but because of the human condition. So that
Right.
if it even had came in China, and maybe you could compare what the Chinese do, of course they would have some of the same ideas.
but you notice it's somewhat different in the Asiatic
In
nations.
China?
Yeah,
Well,
they
there's
have this
rebirth, there's the
idea.
idea of a rebirth.
Well, they have this idea of karma though, and it's pretty different. It's very different, really. It's really different in these.
Kinda like you pay for your sins.
Well, it's like, yeah, karma is like, it's like, you're suffering in this life because of what you didn't understand in the past life, or you didn't, like apprehend, and the things that you neglected, and the things you failed to do, and the sins you, or whatever, the bad things you carried on, you're gonna carry them until you finally become enlightened and merge with this great, I don't know, sense of the infinite or whatever. And,
So if I could take the concept of, and I hear you saying that there's actually almost like two universes of thought that are different or
they're
whatever.
pretty different.
But if there are, because they still involve immortality, they still
Yeah, oh, yeah.
involve,
You
you
can't,
pay for your acts.
I don't think you can
somehow.
have a successful, they found out that there's two really important things in religion, these contemporary sociologists, and I really accept that. I mean, there's a lot of other things, but one is getting a sense of being immortal, that you're gonna live forever, and the other is that there's a sense of justice that's satisfying. And of course, that's, bad people are gonna pay for their sins, which they don't a lot of times.
And
So
you
good
know.
people are
if
gonna
these
get
are,
rewarded
if these are
for it.
fundamental to the human condition.
Yeah, yeah.
If they are fundamental to the human condition, what does it mean to fight your humanity, to deny it, or to, it's kind of like saying, yes, this is totally natural, this is how we are, this is how we've evolved, we're believing creatures, and so we're going to sit in an atheist group and have a conversation like this, goes against our fundamental humanity.
It doesn't go against mine,
But-
I mean, I think we should outgrow these things.
It's aspirational though, I think.
Yeah,
is
thank
that
you, Norm,
We're
yeah,
trying to
aspirational.
do better, so that 100 years ago, 200 years ago, slavery was acceptable
Yeah,
among the middle class, average white
Sure.
person, it was acceptable. So we've gotten beyond that in terms of our morality.
Slavery is a fundamental human
Well,
desire or something?
power over someone else is, I think, is one of those common human traits, yeah,
Mhm.
power.
we now, the West at least, we now, like see slavery as a wicked, egregious thing. Whereas before, we said, well, a lot of people said scripture,
Yeah.
and,
I
and
think-
so there's a different
But I
outlook.
mean, because also, the desire to have sex is fundamental to humanity.
Yeah.
Do you go against that? I'm just asking, if there are things that are fundamental to who we are.
Yeah, but I mean, I think
But
that,
we're also fundamental to be curious and to,
Yeah.
right, to want to know.
yeah, and question
Which
it.
brings us to a place where we see the BS of here
Yeah.
and there. So it just seems to me that because most people do believe.
Well, most people don't wanna think.
Right, and
They
you know,
like to
when we
feel,
talk
they
about
like
the-
to feel secure.
when you talk about the concept of having power, like with the slavery concept, religions, their general thing is you need to give in to a great power. You
Yeah.
need to absolve yourself of
Yeah.
responsibility.
Well, that's the point,
You know,
yeah,
to
yeah. But
follow.
see, we've grown up, some of us.
We're skirting, I mean, we're getting off the topic.
Yeah.
I can talk to you more about that later. I'd like to.
Okay.
Back to the similarities about the myth is another one is, you mentioned the use of water for cleansing, and that's also very important in Judaism. So in Orthodox Judaism, I don't know if you knew this, you know, before you eat, not only would you just wash your hands, you would also, you sit down and then you have a pitcher of water and you pour it on your hands.
Wow,
and you
no,
say
I
a
did not know
ritual.
that.
And it's not to literally, you know, physically wash your hands, it is to cleanse in the spiritual sense
Spiritual
of the
sense.
word. And you say a prayer, and there's another ridiculous thing that I refuse to do, but the ultra-Orthodox, that's what they do.
That's interesting.
It's ridiculous.
I
but
didn't
you
know
see
that.
how important the water is even in Judaism.
Water was life.
Yeah, yeah, water is really like.
But they were wasting it, I mean, they were pouring it on the ground, because also, after it touched your skin, of course, you couldn't use it. It was now unclean water.
Unclean, okay, it had
Right.
cleansed you and
Do it
it was
over
now
It has cleansed
unclean.
you.
Yeah, it had taken
Yeah.
on your dirt, as it were, your spiritual
Yeah,
dirt.
Sins.
it was done.
So, did you ever see that?
Yeah, Deborah's uncle, yeah, would do that, and I wouldn't, so I'm not.
Like,
participating.
when he ate at dinner, you know?
Yeah.
And then so where would the water go, like in a
It
basin?
was in
or-
the kitchen, it was just in the kitchen, I guess he had to get up, but,
Oh,
it was sitting on the counter in
wow,
a basin, one of those old-fashioned
yeah,
basins
yeah,
where they would
and then,
collect the
wow,
water.
wow, that's incredible.
And they would say a prayer, and then you were done, it was just, you know, just a minute, and you didn't have to like flood your hand, you just a little here, a
Just a
little
little
there, and
bit.
you're done.
Okay,
It's
oh,
kinda like
Yeah.
holy water,
yeah, like
Yeah.
holy water.
very similar. But
Actually,
it-
it's a lot cleaner instead of dipping your hand in that font.
Yeah, but if you were to say to a Jew, this is just a lot like what the Christians do in the holy water and the baptismal, they would deny it. They would say, oh no, these are completely different things. These
Yeah,
have no similarities whatsoever. They weren't gonna say these are the same thing.
no, they won't.
They
won't.
believe this.
Their things are better, they're true, you know,
Yeah.
God laid this down and the other people are screwed up.
I can't remember the exact how they did this, but it was with permission. They would have crutes and fill it with holy water from the fountain, from the font where everybody dipped their little hands in.
Ay, ay, ay.
Yeah, you were allowed to do that and take it home and bless your home.
I think you're right. I
You
remember
remember that?
something like that where you could fill the bottle. Now they sell it, I think.
And I think now you don't have to worry about the contamination,
Yeah, I think
except
they
who
sell it.
manufactures it.
So it's not just
Uh,
bottled water, it's bottled holy water.
Bottled
They're
holy
selling,
water.
They
Nev-
sell a lot of
Evian.
it, and at Lord's they sell a lot, but the church, you know, won't guarantee that water. That's very
Well.
interesting, but they still sell it.
Yeah,
No warranties expressed
sprinkle it
or
around. My
implied.
mother did that. She would sprinkle it.
Yeah, they would. They would take it from church. I remember that my grandmother would do that.
Yeah.
My mom had a crucifix, which I have now, but you would slide up the crucifix and inside was a bottle of holy water.
Oh,
Oh
my
my
gosh,
goodness.
I do
Two
remember
candles,
something like that.
Like you would slide it up and set that down and then put the crucifix, and then light some candles.
I
and you'd
think
have
I
the holy
remember
water.
something
Oh my
like that when I was
gosh.
at school.
Yeah.
Pip Holmes having that.
Here's the water cleansing again.
Yeah.
Except that's all really dirty water unless you bought it, you know,
What do we
clean.
know about dirty?
You don't know dirty.
Well,
Spiritually clean.
I've
but-
told Jim and Norman so many times that they must be sick of it, but in the Greek Orthodox Church, they would actually, you know, bless the bread and wine in the transubstantiation, and then they would have, you know, naturally a altar boy holding the cloth so nothing was spilled of the body and blood of Jesus. And when you came up for communion, you took from the cup and the spoon that everybody had, the big cup, you got real wine, you didn't get
same
a wafer.
spoon.
They always said the Catholics didn't, you know, what, with a piece of bread, you know, forget it, you know. We've got the real thing, and you had the wine and the thing. And, you know, you can imagine, can't you imagine during flu season? But, you know, nobody got sick on the spot. So if you mentioned that, you know, they'd always go, did you ever see anybody get sick from communion?
Right in
And this
front of
was
you.
their argument.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
it.
you show me somebody that walked out of that church sick.
Yeah.
Now, you know,
Well, the
how are you
latest
gonna show them
communion-
that?
Latest communion I've seen, they have a tray full of little plastic cups.
The Greeks? I wondered what
Well,
they
at
were
church
doing now.
nowadays, and they'll have two trays, one with the juice and one with the
Thanks
booze.
for telling me. Is that the Greek Orthodox?
No, I don't know where I saw that.
Probably not.
Yeah, you know what, I'm gonna
I think
look it
it's where
up because
sane
I don't know
people
what
go to
they're
church.
doing now.
Because you don't want to drink out of that same damn glass. I know silver may have some antibiotic properties.
I doubt it though.
No.
But
God.
copper does.
You mentioned honey
Huh?
as well,
Oh,
the use
yeah.
of honey.
Yeah,
Use of honey, and I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's quite interesting. The only thing I can say is that the Jews also, in the New Year, that's their folk. It's more of a folk tradition, but it is part of the holiday of Rosh Hashanah, celebrating the New Year. You have honey with apples for the sweet New Year.
oh, that's
We
nice.
eat honey with apples, and we did that, you know, as a child, I remember that vividly. But you talked about honey given to the initiates,
Yes,
to the converts,
Yeah.
to start them out.
and newborns
Newborn,
also.
so it is some similarities, again, with that myth of beginning, of starting, just as with the Jews doing it in the New Year.
And
Well,
you
Levi
catch more
Strauss
flies with
thinks-
honey than- I mean, you start out the whole experience with sweetness. Like
Yeah,
Oh,
First-
sure
first-
away, sure
First
away.
day of believers, and it's the best day of your life.
well, Levi Strauss believes that because it's a liminal thing, that it moves from the raw of like, you know, like uncivilized life or whatever, non-civilization, or, you know, like, what am I trying to say?
Barbarians?
Barbarians, yeah, savagery, to the cooked of civilization. That's what he writes about. One of his volumes was raw and the cooked. And honey is liminal because it's not really cooked,
No.
but it's raw,
Yeah.
but it tastes like it's cooked and it keeps pretty well
Yeah,
too.
So their
So
thought
if
was
there's
you were
some kind
moving-
of magical sense to it, he
Oh.
doesn't say it's magical, but it's like it moves from the savage to the civilized, where
And
we
so our
cook the
belief,
food
their
instead of,
belief is they're going from savage to civilized.
yeah,
And we're looking back at them and saying, oh, we're moving out of savage
yeah,
and into even yet a higher level of civilized.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think that slowly we are, or at least some of us. It's very
Yeah.
slow, it's very slow, but I think it's coming, I hope.
I have one more comment.
Yeah, Norm, you've had a lot of good comments tonight,
Yeah.
and you've brought in the Judaic thing.
And I
that's
have a
so
comment
similar.
after Norm's comment,
Okay,
please.
You mentioned the Christians were, or even pre-Christian ritual would be to mock the believers. I think it was a pretend mocking of the believers. Is that what you were saying? That the Christians had to be mocked, had to be humiliated?
oh, I see, yeah, I see what you said, yes, no, actually, it was, no, it was the initiates for the
The initiates,
Dionysian
yeah.
rites, yeah,
But they were pretending to mock them.
yeah,
They weren't really mocking.
no, they weren't really mocking, it was part of the ritual,
But they had to go through this.
yeah.
And that you're saying you
They
derive.
weren't Christians, they were the people that were worshiping Dionysius.
And were you comparing that to the mocking of Christ?
That's a stretch, but Freak and Gandhi seem to think that
Yeah.
there's a connection.
Well, that's fine, because you can see the comparisons of this fake mocking of Dionysus by the pagans, and then by Jesus. Compare that kind of mocking with the mocking of Muslims, with Islam,
Yeah.
and with Muhammad, and you can see the differences in how the two religions perceive mocking. Like one as sort of the Christians as martyrdom. It's like you're going to take the humiliation because that's part of the testament of your belief. That
Yeah.
you're not going to kill the person who's mocking you. It's like, oh well, this is a test of my humility. They're making fun of me. They're laughing at me.
Yeah,
And yet
but I'm on the right path.
I'm on the right path. I'm not going to kill them. I'm not going to fight them. I'm going to take it silently, and keep my path, you know, on the road to crucifixion or martyrdom or whatever.
Yeah, but remember, the risen Christ is gonna be pretty nasty eventually, when
Okay,
he comes back.
yeah, but that goes to the divine punishment, that's
Yeah.
divine punishment. But compare that to the Muslims who say, you cannot mock me, I will kill you.
Oh, yeah, like immediately. We're not gonna wait. We're not gonna wait a
I'm
few
just saying.
thousand years. No, really, yeah, no, you know, it's much
taboo
more
to talk to
violent.
Those guys about.
Jim?
Yes, oh, thank you very much. We can see many examples of the dying, reviving God throughout history, and I'm wondering, in our contemporary society, if we aren't doing the same thing of the dying and reviving God in the celebrity culture. We get people who are the sports figures, or mainly it happens in entertainment, but any celebrity, and we invest in them a lot of our desires, a lot of our hope, and build that person up. And they get very built up, and we're looking down the line, we're looking for flaws. And the slightest flaw that comes along, the slightest delusion that comes along with them, we start taking them down. We kill them. We build the person up, there comes the God, and they live like a God, and they
Yeah.
look like a God, and they act like a God. And then we tear them down.
Fall, yeah, and then we could worship a new God.
And 10 seconds later, there's a new celebrity.
Yeah, that's interesting there.
Yeah, that's a good
I wonder
point,
if we're
that's a good
doing
point.
that.
Dying and reviving gods all the
We
time.
have dying and reviving celebrities.
Yeah, dying and reviving
And-
celebrities.
and-
Well, because they are almost like gods and goddesses
Oh,
to
they
some
live
people.
like gods.
Yeah.
The closest to that, I think, for what you're saying, Jim, is Princess Di.
Oh
Because
my
she literally
God.
was killed by the paparazzi.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Like they were chasing
Yeah.
her,
Yeah,
and
Yeah.
she was trying to escape, and they
Yeah.
crashed. So literally, she was loved and hated to death.
yeah, that's a good point.
That's
a
very good point.
Is that also a natural rhythm that when you're a young child and you're looking at this tall person next to you who
Oh, that's
has
a good
all
point,
the
yeah.
power,
This is a good point.
and sometime you hit adolescence, and in your bid for personhood, you kind of got to tear them down.
Yeah, you've got to.
Reject them, and
Yeah, they're
so it's
stupid,
like part of
yeah.
every life cycle.
Yeah,
Then.
Yeah,
yeah,
it
because
is.
you have to make your way.
Yeah.
You have to establish yourself. Wow.
When the parent dies eventually, right?
And then the parent
Yeah.
dies.
Gets weaker and weaker.
At least that's the way it's supposed to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's a good point.
Yeah, that is, that's a
That's a
very
very
good
good
point.
point.
So we do it to our parents, we do it to our stars, we do it to our athletes.
Yeah.
Do we do it to our careers, maybe?
We do it to
I
our
don't know.
gods too, I think.
I hope not.
And I've always been amazed that you know, you could be just the absolute most awesome person on the planet. You know, if Gandhi in his last year molested a child, that's all you'd ever think about him.
Oh my gosh.
One
yeah.
bad moment, that's what it takes. You remember, who was the politician? Howard Dean or something?
Wasn't Howard
Oh,
Dean.
Yeah, I know who you're talking
A
about.
real smart guy.
Who
but-
was it?
What took him down?
This affair, you mean?
No, he said he got excited
Oh, the
at the
anger.
crowd and he goes, yeah!
Oh, yeah, that
That
was
was the
Dean.
end
I
of
think.
him,
Howard
one
Dean.
yelp,
I think it was Dean.
one
Yeah,
yelp.
yeah, the people were ready to tear him down.
He was
obviously.
like a brilliant guy, but it's just
Yeah.
one yelp.
Yeah.
Mhm. That was him.
Yeah,
And
that
you
was.
latch onto it and
Yeah.
that's all he is. Now who was the other guy who text messaged a picture of his junk or something?
Oh my
Oh,
gosh,
there's
that
lots
was
of them.
terrible.
Wiener, yes, he had to have that
Yeah.
name. That didn't help.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what you achieve. You need one moment and you
Yeah.
latch onto it.
yeah.
Jim, are we concluding our discussion?